Uh-oh.
It's the new computer.
No, it's not. There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome, I guess, to our second Crush Club chat. So for most of you know me, I'm Shalane Sliggers. I'm the Direct-to-Consumer Wine Club Manager here at Tin Horn Creek. And sitting to my right, your left, is Andrew Windsor, our winemaker.
Yes.
Hello, Andrew.
Hi.
And then behind the scenes today, we have Jessica. Jessica, why don't you come over and say hello to everybody?
First webinar, Crush Club Chat of 2018.
Yeah. First Crush Club Chat of 2018.
Look who's here.
Hi. Well, there she is. And so it's Jessica's first time behind the scenes manning the fort.
She's quarterbacking the operations.
She sure is, because apparently I had to be ready for my close-up today.
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. And we seem to always... this is my second time hosting, but every time I host, it seems we always are drinking through 8 different wines for whatever reason. I think it might be a conspiracy that they want me to drink through a lot of wines.
I won't stay at work this late unless I'm
drinking
8 wines.
Well, exactly, yeah. Right? So tonight is all about library wines. As you know, you guys all got your email today. The library sale is live and up and running. We've gotten quite a few orders in, which is fantastic. There's very limited quantities on some of them.
Do you have to be a Crush Club member to be able to buy library wines?
Yes, that is
not a staged question, by the way.
No, I know. You do have to be a Crush Club member. It's one of the perks of being a member.
Gotcha.
So, we always want to give things to our club members first. So, shall we get started?
Absolutely.
All right. I think our first one up is the 2013 Gewürztraminer.
Yes. So if you're not part of the Crush Club, 4 Gewürztraminers followed by 4 Reserve Merlots. All starting with a 2013 Gewürztraminer. This is where it's always handy to have Andrew Moon in the house because he's knowledgeable about the vintages that occurred.
But he's in Australia right now.
Prior to you and I working here. But he is in Australia. I can't really sympathize with him because I just got back from Australia.
I'm really happy that he is not more tan than he is right now.
It's just the lights.
It's not.
It's the white lights of the stage here.
Whatever.
All right. So 2013, going back to the tech sheets, looks like it was a warm growing season, cool fall. I think a little bit more detail than that wouldn't hurt. It was kind of in line with being what we would call a typical growing season for the Okanagan. The fall during the harvest was a little bit cooler, I think, than average, but the fruit was very, very clean. I think one of the important things to note here is my first vintage was 14, the next one. But Sandra would always pick Gewürztraminer on pH. So if you're not a chemist, pH is a measurement of acidity. Flavor profiles with Gewürztraminer tend to trend along acidity and follow it quite closely. But that was the primary criteria for Sandra calling picks for Gewürztraminer. What do you think of the wine, Shalane?
I like this. It has a lot of the floral characteristics that you're used to with the Gewürztraminer. Has some really great acid balance still. Like, it doesn't taste like it's a 2013. Like, it tastes like it was just bottled now, like what we'd be selling right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like the freshness of this wine. The wines prior to 2014 were typically quite a bit drier. When I moved in 2014, I started to pick the Gewürztraminer more on the berry ripeness and flavor profile of the fruit as opposed to just pH. Obviously, winemakers consider all of the numbers that you get when we analyze the grapes, but I think as a consequence of looking for flavors in the grapes themselves, there's a natural tendency to pick them a little bit riper, and they ended up with a little bit more sugar moving on. But I like the dryness of this wine. There's a lot of fruit that really actually gives it a perception of sweetness still.
Yeah, you get all the tropical fruits as well still. I always found interesting when I've been on the other side of the camera doing these chats is that, 10 10 and 11 were always cold, and then 12 was kind of going back, and then 13 was what Sandra always kind of considered a meh year, but she's always felt that those kind of produce the best wines, which is interesting because this is really, really good still. I like this.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, we did library tastings last year of Gewürztraminer going back to the late 90s. And surprisingly, for a variety that doesn't have a lot of acidity, a lot of people sort of associate cellaring potential of whites with acidity. But Gewürztraminer has very little and is actually probably one of the best aging whites that's out there.
Well, I actually have a question regarding that, because I think as a rule of thumb, most wine drinkers think whites you drink fresh and best. That's the best way to do it. People don't often think that cellaring their white wine, it's not something that people do usually. And then what I found interesting when you started coming as the winemaker is that you gave the 14 actually up to 10 years cellaring potential. And that kind of blew all of us away when that happened. Where I was like, what? Not 1 to 3 years? What is this? Who is this crazy man?
I probably ignored the sales people and
you think?
Tend to do that. And just went with, if you are really a passionate Gewürztraminer drinker, which there unfortunately isn't a lot. We actually, I think, are one of the biggest Gewürztraminer producers in North America. Don't quote me on that, but it's not a lot of people that make a lot of Gewürztraminer. But if you really, really like the variety, you are well aware of its cellaring potential. It's not a wine for the lighthearted, but it's also not a wine for the masses. There's a lot of people that just can't get over the floral aspect of it. It's similar to Muscat in that variety, in that sort of same vein. Like, it's really got a unique flavor profile, but it will age no problem.
I actually have a cellaring question.
Ooh.
Ken and Jane, if you have a...
Hi, Ken and Jane. Furman, hi.
It's actually about the Reserve Cab Franc and the Varietal Cab Franc. They're just wondering because they have a whack of it in their cellar, and they're wondering what the sweet spot would be on that for aging.
Which vintage?
Reserve 14, Reserve Cab Franc, and the Varietal 2015 Cab Franc.
I would say they've got between 2018 and 2038 to drink those. So there's no rush. I mean, we're going to get into the Reserve 14 Merlot. Merlot is, typically one of the more approachable Bordeaux varieties. We'll get to the reds soon enough, but the sweet spot is going to be certainly dependent on your personal preference and your cellaring, the quality of your cellar. I mean, these are all under screw cap, so there's not really going to be much issue with leakage or anything like that. But that's a good question. But why don't we get into more detail about the reds once we taste some reds, and we can go through the flavor profiles. And if we have time, then I can talk about what a wine, what characteristics in a wine you're looking at that are going to tell you this wine, we should start drinking it now, because it might be getting beyond its life expectancy. But
just as an aside, Jane and Ken, if you ever need any help drinking those, I am just a phone call and email away, because those are probably two of my favorites, actually. So just saying, if you need help, if you find that like, oh no, I think I have too much, I'm right here. Just for you guys.
As a rule of thumb, if you've got a case, drink one. If it's red, you could probably get away with drinking one every second year, and then just gauge how the wine is doing based on that. With whites, I would probably drink one a year if you really are into aging wines. Drink one a year and see how it tastes. If it tastes like it's getting a bit, if it's losing its sort of fruit intensity and you want that, then drink them quicker. If you really enjoy the evolution of the wine and how it is aging, then keep aging them and keep drinking one a year. But I mean, as a winemaker, I'm tasting most of these wines. Certainly I'm drinking, the last 2 to 3 vintages often enough, and you see substantial change in wines. They might be finite to most people, but to me, I'll see substantial change in a wine over the course of 3 months. certainly whites evolve quicker. But yeah, things can happen quite quick. But before we end up in a 3-hour chat here, we'll get on to the next wine, which is the 2014.
It's the 14. This is your first vintage.
This is my first crack at Gewürztraminer here in not in the Okanagan. I did one in 2010, but my first one here at Tinhorn Creek. The vintage itself was probably the easiest and one of the nicest vintages that I've ever been able to be a part of in terms of just growing season was ideal. Summer was warm, but not too hot. Harvest period, Gewürztraminer, certainly in 2014, we would have picked the 3+ blocks, certainly 3 blocks that we have here on the Golden Mile bench. We would have picked them over a month. So we'd have picked off one, at reasonable ripeness mid-September, and then the last one probably would have come off. Actually, I have the tech sheet here.
We all did. In all fairness, we did tease you a lot.
September 22nd through to October 10th. So not quite a month, but a solid 2+ weeks. But yeah, ideal ripeness on all the parcels. A bit more, a bit more sugar in the berries. You see a bit more of that sort of tropical fruit come through, whereas I think the 13 showed a bit more of the floral aspects. The 14, you see a lot more of the sort of lychee, tropical fruits and strawberries.
Definitely more of the tropical fruit flavors on this, even on the nose as well.
Still very youthful, a lot of banana. And I mean, the thing I really like about Gewürztraminer makes it unique as a white wine is the texture of the wine. It's a very broad sort of, I don't want to call it viscous, but it has a lot more palate weight than I think any other white variety that we're currently growing. And this is all done in stainless steel tanks and stainless steel barrels. So there's no oak influence here to kind of give it any more weight. This is all just naturally from the fruit itself. And I think the balance on this one is really, really nice. Still nice sweetness up front, kind of highlights the fruit, and then a nice sort of citrusy finish.
Yeah, and it has a nice long finish as well. Like I'm still getting it, which is nice. So,
All right.
All right. Any more questions coming through, Jess?
Yeah, actually, we did have one from Barb. So do you recommend decanting library wines, and for how long?
Yes, I do. Especially if the wine is one of these Bordeaux varieties, particularly maybe a Pinot Noir. I might not. But again, it kind of would depend on the vintage. But as a general rule, I think a lot of the Bordeaux varieties can handle decanting, no problem. For the most part, our wines tend to not really throw too much sediment, but more for just aeration and allow the wines to open up. I think for the most part, all of our reds minus the Pinot, you could decant. We pre-check some of these wines, and the 11 is still a wine that you could decant, and it would benefit from some air. Jess, you asked me before the show whether or not we should be decanting some white wines, and again, I think it depends on what you're looking for from a stylistic perspective. But the next wine, the 15 Gewürztraminer, I would probably decant this wine as I would with some of the younger, bigger wines that we make. Even like a 15 2-bench white, that is a wine that again it'll broaden up as it warms up in the decanter, and as it gets more air, it'll fill up and flush out and become a substantially different wine. And yeah, I think they would definitely benefit from it.
Interesting. This one actually, between the 13 and the 14, has a little, like I'm not getting as much on the nose on the 15.
The 15 is an interesting one because in 14 we had a very good crop, and we had quite a lot of Gewürztraminer. And I think historically we've been buying one block of Gewürztraminer. Okay. But in 15 we didn't need it, and so it was 100% from the Golden Mile bench. Plus, it was also the first year that sub-appellation or sub-GI was approved. So it was the first time we were able to actually put Golden Mile bench,
which is really cool,
on the label. Yeah. So this is the one and only Gewürztraminer in the flight that is the Golden Mile Bench sub GI.
And so in order to be from being able to put Golden Mile Bench on the label, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so 95% of the grapes have to come specifically from the Golden Mile Bench region. So if you've been to Tinhorn Creek, as you drive up that steep hill of a driveway that we have, that right there is kind of telling you that you're coming up onto the Golden Mile Bench. And so that runs across 4 creeks here on the western side of the valley between Osoyoos and Oliver. And we're kind of in the northern portion of it. So it's the first subsection of the Okanagan Valley, which is a few hundred kilometers long, and it's the only one in BC currently. So pretty cool. It's the only way that you can tell that your grapes and the wine from those are actually from a specific area in what is the broader Okanagan. 15 as a vintage was a hot one. In terms of, I think, total heat units across the year, it's not the top one on record, but certainly during the harvest, so September, October, it was very, very warm, and I think we ended up picking almost all of this. Let's go to the tech sheets.
Aren't you glad I printed those off?
I am. Well, I probably had it all memorized, but now that I can cheat, it's easier.
Well, you kind of made fun of me earlier about having the tech sheets, and so here we are.
So yeah, we picked almost all of the 15 in a week, as opposed to at least 2 weeks for the 14. So much more condensed harvest, much more challenging growing conditions for white wines in general. But if you like powerful, full-bodied wines, 15 is a great vintage for that.
So now I believe on our PowerPoint that we have just going back and forth with, we've put on the cellaring potential as regarding the tech sheets. So the 14 went 2 to 10 years, and now we're back to 3 to 5.
Yeah.
Is it because of the vintage or the growing season?
I think the balance of the wine was thrown off a little bit by the heat. And it's a more challenging vintage. I think there's enough sweetness there, but the wine to me just tastes a little bit more fragile than the 14. The 14, very serious, seems like it's not shy at all, and it just to me tastes like it's ready to go to the distance. This one has a bit more sort of, the mid palate seems a little bit leaner. There is still a good amount of sweetness to the wine, and it carries that sort of sweetness in the finish. But it just doesn't have the persistence in the weight. Yeah. I do like the grip, though. It seems to have a little bit more grip and structure, which will probably give it a bit more aging potential. And you get that in hotter vintages. The tannins of whites and reds they get amplified in the heat and the sun.
I have a question
from
actually Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Yeah. If you could just repeat it too, they're just having a hard time hearing me apparently back here. But
okay.
She's actually wondering if you can taste the difference between vintages.
All right. So Carol wants to know, can we taste the differences in ages and vintages?
With the Gewürztraminer, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, Canada, I've had the opportunity to make wine in a couple of different countries. Some of those you really need to pay attention to the vintages because they have a significant impact on the style of the wine and the flavor of the wine. And then I've worked in other countries like New Zealand and Australia where there's substantially less variation. If you like your wines to be like Coca-Cola and you want it the same every day, then it's probably not the place to be searching for wines. But if you like the variability and the complexity that you get when you have a cool vintage in 2010, 2011, a nice vintage in 2014, a hot vintage in 2015, a cold vintage in 2016. You do have to, spend 5 seconds and pull out your iPhone and Google the vintage chart when you're shopping.
I don't know if sure. I've never even known you could Google a vintage chart.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, well,
this is my more moment right here. I didn't know.
No,
cool.
It's critical for understanding how wines perform. So, as a winemaker, I don't really dictate the style of the wines nearly as much as people would suspect. Like, for the most part, it's nature that drives flavors and creates the differences between these wines. That's why we're sitting here and doing a vertical. It's a really interesting way to learn about vintages is to do comparative tastings. And if you understand and you go through sort of the temperature schemes and the growing conditions of each vintage as you taste them, then you will start to associate, whether or not you have any understanding of a vintage of a French wine from 2015. If you taste it and you know that producer and you see that there's a lot of fruit there and it's very ripe and really rich, you can probably suspect that it was a warmer vintage in France. If it's leaner and it's tighter and it's a bit more austere, then that's going to likely mean that it was a colder vintage. So there's a huge variation in Canada. It's probably one of the most challenging places in the grape growing world to actually try and make high quality wine. It makes it very exciting for me and certainly Andrew Moon, our viticulturist, to continue to try and make the best wines year in and year out with a constantly changing climate and that. But that's part of the job. No vintage is the same, and you got to be good at what you do to try and make good wine.
Well,
I don't know if that answers the question, but
I hope it answers the question, yeah. Carol. I have a question actually. What do you mean by grippy? Like what? Like for the layman? Like
yes,
I've been known to use it, and I just realized I really don't know what it means.
Right.
Confession time.
So I use the term grippy more or less to articulate the tannin structure of a wine. And so tannins are common in all foods and beverages. Something like, again, to use a reference of Coca-Cola again, they're not promoting us or sponsoring us or anything, but if you taste something that causes a bitter reaction in your mouth, say you bit into a seed, literally of any kind, almost every seed is somewhat bitter. And so it'll cause your taste buds to actually stick up and react. Your body does that naturally as sort of a self-defense mechanism, because most bitter plants and food products actually are mildly toxic to humans. So as a consequence, we have a natural reaction to them. But I use it, to just talk about the grip and the texture of the wine. For the most part, it's a lot of people have very highly different sensitivities to bitter flavors. What might be excruciatingly bitter and painful for somebody to drink might be almost incomprehensible and not noticed by another person. So that's why all of your tastes are very unique to you. And, when I'm talking, perfect example, talking about cellaring wines, something that you might think is too bitter and undrinkable and needs to be aged for 5 to 10 years, allows those tannins to soften. Somebody else might think that's perfect. So, when we're talking about ranges of cellarability of wines, it's always going to be, unique to the individual consumer. And like I said, the only way to know is to try it. And if you like it, keep drinking it. If you don't like it and you find it too bitter, certainly for reds, time to age them. For whites, maybe you should try a different grape variety, because some varieties certainly have almost no bitterness, and others have substantial amounts. So,
thank you. I think I can honestly now say
from a geeky perspective,
from a very geeky perspective, like I can say grippy and not be in some sort of shame spiral going, I've just lied. So now I'm not lying anymore. So thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks for that question.
All right. Last of the Gewürztraminers?
Last of the Gewürztraminer. It's the 2016.
Current release.
The current release of the Gewürztraminer.
So this vintage is was a cool one. We did have for the Okanagan, we actually had some precipitation.
Welcome precipitation sometime.
In September and October. A small amount, which allowed this vintage to actually grow a little bit of botrytis, which is also known as sort of the noble rot. It's a mold, a fungus that attacks the berries, but instead of giving it an off flavor, it actually concentrates the sugars and gives it a very unique flavor profile that, regardless of the grape variety, most botrytized wines have a very similar sort of honeysuckle aroma, and it allowed us to actually, in 2016, make a substantially riper style of Gewürztraminer that is not normally possible here, certainly not in the Golden Mile bench.
You definitely get the honeysuckle on that.
I have a quick question here.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite out of the 4 Gewürztraminers?
Ooh, I'm going to have to go from tasting tonight. My personal favorite would have to be probably the 13. And I like the 16 as well because there's something a little bit different. I wasn't sure about it at first because of the sweetness level. It's probably the sweetest Gewürztraminer we've done in a really long time, correct?
Possibly of all time. I'm not entirely – I'm probably safe at saying it's the sweetest one we've done. I think it's close to – let's check the text sheets.
It's 16 grams per liter. So for me, typically when I first started here in 2014, I used Gewürztraminer as my quote-unquote patio pounder.
Yes.
It was the one where like I could sit with like a straw in it and like the thoughts of, some hot young stud, sorry, Paul, fanning me with grape leaves and all the whole 9 yards. I had a dream, right? A girl can dream.
Is this all because of one glass of Gewürztraminer?
One glass of Gewürztraminer. I was just like, the fantasy was born. It happens. A girl's got a dream, right?
Yeah, indeed.
But with the 16, I found it's much more food friendly. Like I'll do this with a spicy red Thai curry. Even a stinky blue cheese would be really good with this, totally. I find.
Yeah.
So definitely these more just drinking on their own, 16 with food for me. But
yeah.
What about your favorite Gewürztraminer?
Hands down the 16.
Yeah.
For me, I've got some of my favorite producers on the planet are in Alsace, in northeastern France, where Gewürztraminer is probably best represented, aside from here at Tinhorn. But those producers stylistically aim for a very intense, powerful style, and this is the closest I think I've been able to get to that archetype. And for me, the wine just has so many layers of complexity, starting with the botrytis. It is noticeably sweeter, but even at the sugar levels that we're at here, typical Gewürztraminers from Alsace would be 2 to 3 times sweeter than that. So it's still in the spectrum of Gewürztraminer, not a overly sweet wine, but I guess when you put it in a historical context to how we've made it, it is noticeably sweeter. But it's also, that will give this wine the potential to age probably forever. As a wine,
you should start making that as your cellaring potential, probably just forever.
The infinity symbol.
I dare you.
All of them from now on. It'll be good forever. No, I think I really cannot wait to have this wine. 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If you do have this one, I think it's still our least expensive wine, but this wine will probably age the most interestingly of all of the whites that we've got. And as I said, forever, for real. It's going to be really, really delicious for a really long time. And you mentioned, we're coming out to Alberta. I don't know if I stole your thunder there, but
that's okay.
We're pairing this wine at some of those dinners in the dessert course, which it will work certainly really, really well at. Fresh fruit with some, some whipped cream or anything like that. A pavlova. I got to give a shout out to my my lady's.
Just gotten back from Australia.
My lady's mom makes the best pavlova in the world, and so I'm gonna give Livia a shout out. This would be great wine for Livia's pav.
Really? Yeah. Well, we'll have to put a request into the chefs in Edmonton and Calgary. This actually has changed the most for me since our pre-taste. We did a pre-taste before the Crush Club chat started tonight, and this has definitely opened up.
Especially as it's gotten warmer.
As it's gotten warmer and on the palate as well.
Yeah.
I still get juicy fruit.
The juicy fruit.
Oh. I have one more question.
Sure.
Before we get off the topic of aging wine. From Valerie. How do you decide how long a wine will age for? Since you said they age definitively.
Experience with drinking wine gives you a little more confidence with making comments such as this wine will age infinitely, but certainly certain varieties have a, I would just call it, the chemistry behind it is far too boring and probably mostly unknown to determine how long a wine will probably age. Certain varieties just have a knack for being able to age well, and Gewürztraminer is one of them. Most Alsatian varieties tend to have a really good ability at aging well. So whether that's Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Riesling in particular, they all seem to age well. Yet they're all very, very different in how they taste, and in terms of their components. The tannin, the grippiness, the acidity, the sugar levels. They're all highly variable, and yet all of them still have an ability to age a long time. Red wines. Again, I kind of feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's a lot of it's going to be up to you and your personal preference. And it's also sort of a cultural thing too. You go into Europe and they'll be drinking wines 15 to 20 years old with a lot more regularity. Here in North America, where it's certainly in Canada, where you can barely even find cellared wines to buy at a retail outlet, you're more or less stuck buying new vintages. And so I think for me, the sweet spot for a lot of them tends to be around 10 years. I think that's when they start to get really interesting, especially if you still like a really vibrant, fruit-driven wine. Well,
don't you think, like, going on that same thread, is that because, and especially in Canada and in BC, it's a relatively new wine growing region. Like, if you think about it, Tinhorn Creek has been here for 24 years. This is our 24th vintage, I think, this year. Yeah. So we don't have that history of saying, this could cellar for 20 years because there was nothing to go back. Do you think that might have had something to do with cellaring potential times before, maybe because we just didn't have the data to coincide?
It certainly helps if you've actually got a proven track record of your wines having ageability. But I think an experienced taster can tell, given even a shorter window of history, within 10 years, if you look up at a say we did a 10-year vertical of this Reserve Merlot, you could see over the course of 10 years the wine has aged, say, out of 100% of its lifespan, it's still probably at 75% in 10 years.
Okay.
And you can extrapolate that out to say, okay, well then, we've got 40 years of wine to go. So you get enough experience and you I think can make those kind of calls.
And do you think because we moved over to 100% Stelvin, we were probably one of the first wineries.
First in Canada to
move over. Do you think that's benefited us? Like we still get 100%. That nice freshness from it?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I referred to it earlier. We did a tasting early last year of all the wines from, I think, 98 to 07. And most of those were under cork, various types of cork. And then we kind of sort of snuck into a couple of the Stelvin era wines, and there's an immediate noticeable difference between the consistency and the preservation ability of Stelvin over cork. And you still have a lot of diehards that believe that cork is certainly a superior closure. You won't find any of them in Australia or New Zealand. They're almost exclusively screw cap production, unless maybe they're selling into some markets that are a bit more sensitive. For some reason, some markets still have a sensitivity to screw cap, giving it a sort of indication that it's of a lower quality wine. But that, that's sort of a 90s thing.
Well, coming from an experience of being in fine dining for years and years, there is a certain romance to having that experience when you're in a dining room and somebody's like doing the cork, pulling it out and doing the whole entire 9 yards. It kind of isn't the same with the Stelvin, but in the same breath that I say that, if I'm going to get a better quality wine and fresher under a Stelvin, I would prefer that. I'd pay better money for that rather than knowing, is it going to be corked? Is it not going to be corked?
Plus, if you do have a nose for corked wines, then every time they approach your table with a cork and you're in front of 8 friends and you're the one who's ordered the wine, they pass it to you and you have to go through the whole rigmarole of doing the test. And you're like, oh no, is it corked? And then you doubt yourself and you second guess yourself. You're in a big group of people. You don't want to have this conversation with the waiter about a corked product, and then you have to go down that route. So then maybe you say okay to a wine that you think might be corked, and then the entire meal you're second guessing yourself and wondering whether or not this is actually a quality representation of the wine, or is it slightly corked? So, yes, it's a bit more romantic to have the guy come over and give you the white tablecloth show. But I'd rather have somebody just hear that click, continue on with my conversation, have them pour the wine over my shoulder, not skip a beat, and have confidence that wine is totally fine.
Well, and I'm sure you being a winemaker, that in your group of friends, you're that guy. You're the go-to, right? They're just like, we have an expert. So
yeah. So there's even more pressure to get it right.
No pressure. No pressure.
No, I mean, despite the improvements in, I'm digressing into core conversation, but we are.
We're just letting the night take us where it's taking us.
There's still a high percentage. It's still probably somewhere around 15 to 20% of all wines under cork show impact of that cork. So you buy your case of wine, you can randomly pull out 2 of those and expect them to be impacted.
Well, we can bring it back to cellaring, is that these are way easier to cellar as well because they can cellar standing up rather than having to lay on their side, which is always nice.
Definitely a convenience.
I brought it around.
My current
brought it around.
Cellar is mostly just stacks of upright cases of wine. So
yeah,
it is nice.
I'm not really good at cellaring my wine.
I heard it's not you, but I heard it's...
Well, it's never mind. Change. Shush, you'll get me in trouble.
Well, wine's meant to be drunk. So
it's true. So this is the 2011 Oldfield Series Merlot?
Yes.
All right. So the Oldfield Series Merlot is my personal favorite red wine that we do. So I think this is our most elegant red. I love this red wine. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I
would agree with you until we looked at this tasting in preparation for this this chat, because there's some tough guys in here still.
There is.
The 11, which was actually the vintage that we were selling right when I started back in 2014, was a cool vintage, noticeably cool. The wines were not as sort of flamboyant and fruit-driven as even the 10s, which were also a cool vintage, and the 12s and 13s that were following. But the 11, as a consequence of it being a cool vintage, really, I think, give it the most interesting and probably better cellaring potential than a lot of the other ones. And this one certainly stands out in this group of 4 as probably being, I think, the most complete at the moment.
I agree. So I think because we're talking a little bit more about cellaring, and especially now going into the reds. So they say that like 98% of the people who come in and purchase a bottle in any winery drink it right away. Yeah. But I know that there's a large number of our club members who cellar for a really long time, which I think is great. But there's some very obvious conditions that you should stay away from. And we happen to have a poll about what temperature your cellar should be kept at for wines. So
is that happening now?
I'm hoping so. Yeah. So I think we have a poll. What temperature? So Jess, if you want to,
we'll start a poll right now.
Give us the options for which temperatures.
So we have the option of 21 degrees Celsius.
21 degrees Celsius.
13 degrees Celsius.
13 degrees Celsius.
7 degrees Celsius in the summer and 16 degrees Celsius in the winter.
That sounds like too much work.
And mine never lasts that long.
That sounds about me.
That's
that sounds about right for me.
Yep. I mean,
you can't tell them the answers. They're answering right now.
I don't know the answers.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah. I think, the biggest mistake you can make when you buy a bottle of wine, certainly coming out here to the Okanagan, is if it's the summertime and it's 36 degrees outside and you're going to go on a full day of touring around and tasting wine, don't put the wine in your trunk and leave it there in the sun all day.
Yeah, that's the worst.
If any wine hits 30 plus degrees Celsius, you're going to cause more damage to it in the first day that you own it, rather than the next 10 years of trying to cellar it perfectly. So
I've actually seen quite a few people who are wine touring in the summer who now have like the coolers and the ice packs in the back of the car, which is super smart because like we're really hot here in the summertime.
Absolutely.
Imagine if we were bottled.
How's the poll coming?
How's the poll going?
So far, highest votes go to 13 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
But mine never lasts that long. Is pretty high. We
nice. I like the style. So this is why you guys are club members.
Yeah.
This is why we love you as club members. So
that's why we're selling old wines for you.
It's all coming full circle.
Because we know you can't sell her.
All right. So it's 13 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
Which makes sense. I happen to have the perfect area right underneath the stairs. That's like a natural cellar, which is nice. I spent a lot of time.
That's where you have a lot of empty boxes down there?
No, I organized everything this year. Like it's like legit really nice now.
Nice.
I still have a lot of rosé. A lot of 16 rosé.
So do I. I've got some 15 and 14 too.
Somebody drank my 15. I'm not going to mention their names.
That culprit again.
That's okay.
I think I really like the 11 Reserve Merlot. So most of you guys would be familiar with the Reserve series. We do tend to get some Cab Franc into this wine. This one also has a little bit of Syrah, about 2%, 18 months in barrel. So the wine is designed for aging. A vintage like 2011 doesn't have such an opulent fruit profile, which I think really the fruits that is in this wine is hanging in there perfectly. But the complexity of this wine really, I think, shows through. Sort of a lot of earthy components, but still bright fruit. Some really interesting sort of peppery
and
sort of sage.
It was awarded 90 points by Wine Enthusiast. I'm finding all the good stuff. I was looking through everything. I was cleaning up our drive. Right. So there you go. This is beautiful. I love this, actually. Yeah, that's really, really nice. Would that cellar longer for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a wine that's going to evolve slowly, but at least another 10 years to go. But again, it all depends on how you like your wines. If you want some of that sort of fruit concentration and power, then I start looking into this wine, and from now and until the next 2 to 3 years, I'd be drinking it. But if you're up for even more elegance and more complexity, more earthy tones, more leather components, then, I would start looking at this wine for the next, leave it for another 4 or 5 years and see how long it can go, which I'm not sure what the text sheet says, but I would give this wine at least another decade easily.
We didn't get that. Doesn't say a Cellaring
it's one of the infinite. It's one of the
infinite. It's one of the infinite ones. Definitely an infinite one. What I find interesting is that because we all know that 10 and 11 were cold vintages, it's kind of one of those ones like, ooh, we want to stay away. But that 11 is beautiful right now, and it's definitely has more of that leather, tobacco, not quite as fruit forward. But I like a wine like that at times. I think it has its place. So I try not to let things like, oh, it was a cold vintage sway me from purchasing something, because it's kind of like movie reviews or even wine reviews. What that wine reviewer didn't like, maybe I absolutely love.
For sure.
That's the beauty of it being subjective.
It's always about personal preference. I mean, this is a wine that if you see it on a wine list somewhere at a restaurant, it's going to be a steal, because the price point of this wine back when it was released was a bargain then. And it's drinking really, really well. So even, if you're up here at Miradoro and you've drank through all of yours, I'm not sure if we've got much of this to sell, but either way, great food wine.
We have about 3 cases of that.
So not a lot.
Not a lot.
But it's definitely worth exploring, especially if you're a huge Merlot fan. I think, this wine highlights why it's sort of been one of our hallmark varieties for a long, long time. 2012. Moving back into a bit more average growing season. By average, I'm just talking about the warmth and the temperatures during the growing season and the harvest, particularly. 12 is a really, really nice, elegant vintage for the most part. But this wine, and when we're tasting it earlier, seemed to have a lot of meat on the bone still.
It did. I think we both said this could definitely lay down for another 10 years at least. Yeah,
this is still, there's a lot of fruit on the nose, but I get a lot of iodine, sort of blue, steak, meaty aromas to it. A lot of leather again, but it's opening up really, really nicely, actually.
It is.
Probably cracked this an hour ago, and it's changed substantially.
This is a really tough gig, but I guess somebody has to do it.
I have a question from Ken and Jane.
Okay.
They're getting really excited about the Creek and the 2015 vintage.
Okay.
I just had a question regarding how long it would age for.
Infinity.
The Creek. Yeah, I mean, it's we're at
They're doing their research.
3+ years now already, and it's only just been released late summer. So that of all of our wines, I think is designed for a really reasonably good long cellar time. It's a really cool wine because it's soft enough to drink now. It is quite approachable. It's not overly tannic and grippy, but it's got this brightness. Cab Sauv, again, all you do is a bit of homework on certain varieties and their potential to age. That's a predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon blend. So it's, that was, of all of the wines that we've been making here, that was the one that was designed to go the longest.
I love the Creek.
Yeah.
Our club members love the Creek as well. They've been buying a lot of it. It's been really awesome.
Yeah, it's tasty. It's tasty. But so is this. This wine, for me, was 12? Almost undrinkable an hour ago. So, we're talking about decanting wines. This wine is still, very assertive and very young, but it's an intense wine, very intense wine.
It's way nicer now. Mm-hmm. That's lovely.
Well, the fruits come out to sort of round out the mid palate. Before it was a lot of tannin that kind of detracted from enjoying the wine and seeing the sort of preserved cherry and cassis and blackberry fruit that was probably there when we bottled it has kind of gone into a little bit of a dull phase, but a little bit of oxygen and a little bit of time over the last hour has really allowed it to come back and bounce back impressively. This is making a case for probably now one of my favorite wines in the flight, whereas an hour ago it was the 11. So
well, we'll have to see the other two, though.
True, yeah, we're only halfway
right.
through.
I think let's be careful here. There's two more to go.
Got pretty excited, but yeah. So 14% Cab Franc in that one, as well as 1% Syrah. Is that the same cepage? No.
Yeah, no, I think the 11 was 289, 9, and 2. Yeah. So what's with the 1 or 2% Syrah? Like, what exactly? Like, does it make a difference? Like, what's the point?
It's probably a sensitive topic.
But
you've asked the question live, so there's no dodging it now. I think Sandra really enjoyed the peppery component that the Syrah brought to the blend.
Fair enough.
We have since removed the Syrah from the blend as of 2014.
Okay.
My justification for that was, I really, really love Syrah, and we only, as club guys might know, we only make a few hundred cases of it.
Yeah.
And that 1% in that blend would have probably represented 20% of all of our Syrah. And so I like to drink Syrah, so I wanted to make more Syrah. So I took it from that blend and added it back to the varietal.
And just went, the reserve Syrah. Oh, wow. The bad puns are coming out.
I did. But, do I think it made a difference? Again, everyone's palate is subjective. I don't see it making as substantial of an impact as I think Sandra did. And I think, adding it to what is traditionally a Bordeaux blend, kind of remove the Bordeaux-esque-ness of the wine. So,
okay.
I don't know. We'll see how the 14 fares. It better be good now.
Well, no pressure. No pressure.
That's right. But
Leave it to me to ask that question, hey?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the last time I do a webinar with you.
That's okay.
13.
Dun, dun, dun.
So along with 12, 13 was a bit more of a typical growing season as well. So not too hot, not too cold. Do you have anything on the tech sheet that's jumping out at you to discuss? I'm still on.
That's okay. It said it was another beautiful, warm, dry summer, along with a cool autumn. So a great growing season for Bordeaux grape varieties. That's about it. And it's 10 to 15 years cellaring. So then that was the jump as well because, we went 7 to 10 for the 2012. And then this was in barrel when you started,
yep.
And then you bottled it essentially, correct?
Kind of. My first month here, it was being bottled, but I kind of let Sandra and her team run with it and finish things off as I learned, everything more of the vineyards and all the other aspects of starting a new job. So it was bottled, I think, in June, mm-hmm. and I started late May. So, but yeah, no, I think when you taste the wines, at 5 years old, almost are ready for this guy, another 10 years is certainly not out of the question at all.
I just don't think I could ever last that long. Like when I first moved here, before I was working at Tin Horn Creek, I went wine touring all the time. And at one point I had gone through all of our house wine, and Paul caught me downstairs in our cellar, just like holding like a baby, a really big bottle that I was waiting to drink for a while. Mm-hmm. And I was so sad. And so it's hard not to just drink them right away and enjoy them. But.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I got into the business in general, is that
your cellar would never run empty.
As long as I know how to make this stuff, I realistically should never run out of it.
Well, here's hoping. Here's hoping, right?
That's right.
You never know.
Yes.
You just never know.
What do you think of the 13?
I haven't tried it yet.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll comment on it. Again, looking at this wine an hour ago, it seemed to be the most approachable, and I still think it is of the first three wines we've tried. It's still the most approachable. The fruit is there; it's plummy, it's soft, and this is quite an easy drinking wine compared to the first two.
I actually like the 12 better than the 13 now.
Yeah.
You're right.
Hopefully I didn't influence that with my enthusiasm, but
no, you don't have to influence my decision making, but
no, have that impact.
No,
people.
Yeah, I don't find there's much on the nose on this one for myself, but a lot more on the palate.
I see a lot more of the barrel spice coming through on this one. It seems to be a bit sort of sweeter, but more in that sort of cappuccino, sort of cocoa powder aroma.
Mm-hmm.
Not super fruity, but the fruit that's there is like really plum jam, really approachable.
Like almost like a gauge plum jam, like going into that. I'm going with my Auntie Pearl's plum jam collection. She makes this jam every year for Christmas. Pearl jam.
Have time for another quick question?
Sure.
Of course we do.
I have a question from Liz. Just wondering if there's a proper way to store or cellar your wine. Angle, like obviously whatever temperature, but the angle or where it is, I guess. You probably want to keep it out of sunlight, obviously.
Again, it depends on what's in your cellar. If you have wines under cork, obviously anything under cork, because cork requires the liquid to keep it moist so that it doesn't dry out and contract and break. So obviously anything under cork you want to have on its side. It probably doesn't hurt most wines to be on their side. Stelvins, you can get away with keeping them upright. Consistent temperature is probably more important than people realize. I know we gave a range as one of the options.
Yeah.
That tends to be, certainly if your cellar is a true cellar and it's in the earth, it's going to fluctuate with the seasonal temperatures. But it is more stable. But yeah, anything under generally 18 degrees and stable is important. Chemistry, how most things work is the warmer the temperatures, the faster the reaction occurs. What you're doing by cellaring wine ultimately is allowing the oxygen and the reactions within the wine itself to react and change and evolve. And as a consequence, the flavors change and evolve. So the warmer that cellar is, the quicker those reactions will occur. The cooler it is, the slower they'll occur. So, if you kept the 14 Merlot and you had two cellars, one was at 17 degrees and one was at 12, you would see the one at 17 degrees would probably be drinking earlier and be more evolved more quickly than the one at, what did I say, 12? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the one at 12. So, if you're one of those people that has a real hard time cellaring wine, but you do have a cellar and you do want your wines to age, then maybe you should look at keeping your cellar temperature a little bit warmer as opposed to substantially cooler. That way you'll get the benefits of aging a wine. The wine itself will stay healthy and it will age consistently, but just a little bit more quickly.
And then I've heard vibration is important as well. Like you don't want it to be like lots of movement, vibrating. Is that true? Why would that, if it is true, why would that be important? Am I just speaking an old wives' tale?
No, that is a good question. I certainly know there's, vibration and energies and things like that likely have an impact, I think, on the wine while it's being made. Well, there's microbial processes going on, whether it's yeast fermentation or bacterial fermentation. But with a finished wine that I don't want to say it's not living from an organic perspective, I I'm just going to say I don't know the answer to that. And
Excellent.
just
I
leave it
stumped
there.
him.
I'll leave it there. It's possible, but I wouldn't spend money on a vibrating system for your cellar.
Well, I think it's no vibration.
Or I would.
But sure, we can go there,
Sure.
weirdo.
Or no vibration. Yeah, if you live next to a train track or subway.
Yeah, okay. Probably not good.
Let's go to the next one.
Let's go to the next one. Wow.
No vibrating.
Maybe you should have had that beer at dinner.
Maybe. Is that a request?
I think so. That's good that you're doing it and not me. Old Tyrannosaurus Rex arms over here. I would never be able to make it.
My tendonitis is.
Oh, God.
Okay.
The 14, San Syrah. Let's do this.
San Syrah. 2014 Reserve Merlot. So this is my first attempt at making a Reserve Merlot for Tinhorn. Really, again, kind of got into it with the Gewürztraminer, but 14 was really a truly excellent vintage across the board for all varieties. It
was a beautiful year. It was a beautiful year.
I've been really lucky every time I move to new wineries. The first vintage there is like ideal.
We did make fun of you a lot about that. A lot. Well, I did.
Yeah. Well,
but I make fun of you.
I don't feel special. You make fun of everybody. So.
Well, especially you.
So 85% Merlot, 15% Cab Franc, 0% Syrah. We did start trialing natural fermentation, so no added yeasts in 2014. The main Merlot component to this wine was 100% natural fermentation. So it was on skins, I think, for close to 8 weeks. And it was actually one of the first red natural ferments that we did here. And so didn't have a lot of experience with natural fermentation prior to that Merlot, okay. But it seemed to work out well. And by 2017 vintage, we're 100% natural ferment now for all reds. But natural mallow and barrel as well. So again, 18 months in oak for all of these guys. What do you think?
It's pretty
missing
damn
a
good.
bit of Syrah.
No, this is actually opened up quite a bit since when we first tasted it.
Not quite as much as the 12. Still
the 12 was kind of the one that really went the furthest since we had done our pre-test. But this is beautiful. Like that's pretty drinkable right now, but that could lay down for another.
Definitely on the palate, there's way more fruit again. As we saw with the 12, they both seemed quite dry and not yielding much fruit, but definitely these two with the hour of air have opened up nicely.
All right, so it's like
Infinite
803.
803.
We have time for one more question because I do have a good one.
Of course we do.
So which oak do you prefer, French, American, or Hungarian?
Oh, God.
Well, that's a whole nother.
That's like a whole entire Crush Club chat.
Quickly, for these wines, historically the Reserve series had always been exclusively French, whereas the Varietal series had historically been predominantly American oak. This is for red specifically. But now there's much less rhyme or reason. Certain whites will see French, and certain whites will see Hungarian. The only one wine now that we tend to use American oak for is the Varietal series Chardonnay. But then once the Chardonnay is done fermenting, we'll move those barrels into Merlot, which tends to be the Varietal series Merlot.
Interesting.
Oh, God. When I started here, we were probably 80% American oak, 20% French.
Okay.
And by 2017, barrel purchase, we're probably 60% Hungarian, 30% French, and remainder, the last 10% would be American. So the oak regime has shifted quite a lot. But I think they all have very key roles to play in different styles of wine that we make.
I think we could actually do probably a whole entire Crush Club chat on oak.
Yep.
We could.
Easily.
So maybe that's what we'll do for one of our Crush Club chats.
Yeah. Was there some announcements to make?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some announcements. So as you know, our library sale is going on right now until February 9th. If you are local and you're watching this, please 48 hours because we need to actually bring them up to the winery. They won't be here. You can't place the order and they'll magically be there the next day. Our next Crush Club chat will actually be with Chef Jeff and Andrew Moon. Oh, dear God. Doing food and wine pairings. And Jeff will actually walk us step through a recipe, which is super cool. That'll be March 20th from 7 till 8. If you're in Alberta, we've got 2 Crush Club events happening March 9th and March 11th with you, me, and Jessica. And that's about it. Thank you so much for joining us. If you couldn't make it tonight, it is replaying on YouTube, and then you can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Night.
Have a good night.
Bye.